Could we call Representative Morgan, please? Representative Alzate? And just a quick, if you have something quick to say, we don't want to...
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, please proceed.
Yeah, so as a chair of the Black and Latino caucus, this is harmful legislation, and it is crucial that we do not pass this legislation. And I laugh because I'm trying not to cry as to how terrible this legislation is. And as a representative from one of the most beautiful and diverse cities, I will just vote no on this legislation because it is terrible, it is harmful, and we need to have constructive, difficult, uncomfortable conversations about all of the topics that are really hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bia.
Yeah, so I think all of the witnesses have said it all, and I don't want to probably beat the dead horse. But however, as a black male, living within the U.S. and just listen to all the testimonies and listen to just read the bill. I read this bill over 4 or 5 times last night. But just I think it's just disgusting that we have to go this route discussing about I think these issues should be discussed in school, most especially in high school, for our students to actually understand exactly, for people to be uncomfortable. Yeah, there is a lot of things that we feel very uncomfortable with, but that doesn't make us that we shouldn't learn about it. Sometimes when we feel uncomfortable, we learn about it and we proceed and we move forward. Whatever the consequences is, we make the best decision based on past things that we have learned. So again, this bill is just it's just eye-opening that this bill is before us today, and we're discussing about these issues. I think based on time, I'm just gonna leave it as it is. But something that totally gonna vote against.
Spoken like a true high school principal in Providence. Thank you, Representative Baya. And Representative Amore is here. Representative Amore, do you want to say a brief?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. As you know, I'm a 30-year history teacher. And many of the topics that have been discussed today by many other history teachers come up in our classes and are some of the most impactful discussions we have. And, whether we be talking about racial profiling cases and the history of white supremacy, these are the things that we need to discuss in order to understand fully our nation's history. So I'll only add to this. I've been engaged in a number of implicit bias courses and training, and I have not experienced any of the things that were listed in this bill during those courses and trainings. I found them to be enlightening. I found them to force me to think a little differently, and I never felt bad when I left there. And this bill asks some unelected bureaucrat somewhere to determine how an individual feels about something after a contract, and I just think that's totally unenforceable. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Amore. Representative Caldwell, East Greenwich.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief.
Thank you.
As many of you know, I have my PhD, and it is in American Studies, and a huge part of our curriculum in academia and American Studies is about critical race theory and about gender studies and the other issues that this bill brings up. That is the way in which I was educated, and it is a way that helps me do this job very effectively and successfully, I think, at times. And the way I just wanted to pipe in to say the way that those areas of study were portrayed tonight by the people in support of this bill are not an accurate reflection of what those disciplines are or about. They are not an attack on anyone. They are a study of our history, our literature, our politics, and everything in the United States of America. And that education has served me well. I wish I had had it earlier. And and that's it.
Thank you, Representative Dr. Caldwell, Pilgrim High School graduate, just public schools, want to plug them. Next, we have Representative Donovan in Bristol. If Representative Donovan is also a career educator, and I'm sure she has some insight into this. Representative Donovan, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as you said, I was a career educator over 35 years teaching health and physical education. I had thousands of students over those years, and I couldn't be more opposed to this bill. Students need a safe place to talk about sensitive topics, and as a teacher, you establish that safe place. And whether they speak it in the classroom with everyone else present, or they seek you out as an individual, we need that freedom to do that. And this, I just can't imagine having that freedom taken away as an educator. So I couldn't be more opposed to a bill with that sort of language attached to it. And thank you for the opportunity to speak out on this.
Thank you, Representative Donovan. Representative Fenton Fung.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm going to keep it very, very brief. When I moved to the UK, one of the first books I read was actually The American Revolution from the British standpoint. And as you can imagine, the British Tea Party wasn't exactly the same way we were taught it, okay? I think on all these issues, more talk, more conversation is better than less. And so for that reason, I would oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Fenton Fung. Representative Giraldo, great city of Central Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rep. Morgan, I'm not sure if you spoke to any Rhode Islanders from communities like mine when considering this bill, but I'd honestly like to meet with you separately, separate from the heatedness and the craziness of today, to have an honest discussion about what this bill means and why it's so hurtful and disrespectful to people like me. I won't repeat all the great points that the callers made today, but I would like to say that as someone who is biracial to a white mother and immigrant Latino father, I can say wholeheartedly, without a doubt, that racism still exists today. It's real, and it should be discussed. It may not be presented in the way that it was 40 years ago, but it certainly kept its way in American society, and I think we need to talk about it, own it, and work together to change it, not run away from it. This is real for people in my community, and Rep. Morgan, I honestly say this with respect, that it must take a blinding amount of privilege, and that it's really disrespectful for you to stand in front of this education committee full of diversity with glass-shattering young women, Black and Latino members from BIPOC-rich cities like Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Providence, and try to get us to believe and proclaim that we cannot treat things like racism and sexism as facts, and that we have to call it as, or consider it just an opinion. To me, that's mind-boggling. So again, Rep. Morgan, I honestly extend an invitation for you and I to link up, because I'd like to have an honest conversation about why this is so damaging. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Representative Kislak of the fashionable east side of Providence.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. I strongly oppose this bill. I think that for the reasons my colleagues have stated, and I just very quickly want to bring Dr. King back into the conversation, because the sponsor led by, I think, misunderstanding what Dr. King was teaching and what he was all about. And so I just want to read a couple of sentences from his April 1963 letter from Birmingham City Jail, where he talks about oppression, states that oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever, talks about Black Americans together with people of color from other communities working together with a sense of cosmic urgency toward the promised land of racial justice. A few paragraphs later, he talks famously, and this my kid, when I was on my way over here, I told my ninth grader where I was going, and he said, "Oh, are you going to talk about the white moderate?" as Dr. King did. So my kid, because of his Providence public school education, was thinking about this exact quote. And Dr. King said he had hoped that the white moderate would see this, the urgency that Black Americans were moving towards the promised land of racial justice. He said, "Maybe I was too optimistic. Maybe I expected too much. I guess I should have realized that Few members of a race that has oppressed another race can understand or appreciate the deep groans and passionate yearnings of those that have been oppressed, and still fewer have the vision to see that injustice must be rooted out by strong, persistent, and determined action. And I call on all of us to engage in that deep reflection that Dr. King called on us to do, so that we can together oppose this legislation and move towards a place of racial justice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Mary Ann Showcroft-Smith, welcome.
My perspective is education and learning is an open book. These topics need to be discussed in a classroom. We need to have these conversations. I'm opposed to this bill. Thank you.
Yep. Do we have someone on? Oh, she's here. Ladies and gentlemen, on this bill, before we start, we have approximately 120 witnesses that have called in. And in order to hear from all of the witnesses, I'm going to ask you to, if we could hold our questions to the end, and we'll call back specifically. We also, due to the fact that we have a limited time in this room, in order to accommodate respectfully all of those 120 witnesses, we are going to be very firm in limiting their testimony to 1 minute. Representative Morgan will get as much time as she needs to explain and advocate for the bill. And I realize that some of the testimony we may hear could possibly be upsetting to individuals on, if there are two sides of this issue, to both sides of the issue or the bill, pro and con. What we are going to demonstrate is civility and respect for all of the witnesses, and we want to be fair to make sure that we give all of our witnesses a chance to speak, and listening to them and hearing from them is our top priority. And with that, Representative Morgan, welcome. Take as much time as you need to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to, before I begin my testimony, to say that I actually invited, I'm not a subject matter expert on this. I've done quite a bit of research, but I'm not an expert, and I did invite 6 experts from around the country to appear so that you could be better informed about this topic and understand its nature and its divisive and insidious quality. I just want to register that giving them 1 minute is not nearly enough. I had told them to prepare for 3 to 5 because I did realize that we have a limited time. And I'd like to figure out with you, Chairman, a way that they can share their knowledge with this body in a more complete way.
Written testimony is acceptable, and as soon as we get it, we will put it up on our website, and furthermore, we will make sure that all the members of the committee get that testimony. And I know for myself that going through written testimony is very more influential on legislation. So
I would hope so.
we
because
respect their expertise, and we look forward to reading whatever they submit. So please proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, I would hope so, because this is a topic that I think is really important to our state, our children, and our sense of community in Rhode Island. My bill seeks to ban a destructive and divisive ideology that is termed critical race theory from our schools and from any entities that do business with the state of Rhode Island and receive government money. Let me explain a little bit about it. First of all, I can tell you that it is here, and it is prevalent in our state. From the emails and the social media that I have received over the last few days, I can tell you that it is in every one of our colleges and universities, and it is in every one of our school districts, K through 12. I was a teenager when Martin Luther King became a leader of the civil rights movement. I heard his "I Have a Dream" speech on television. That day, he set the goal for America. He said that he looked to a day when people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That was the goal. And I embraced it and have tried to live my life that way, and I think America embraced it. We not only held America accountable to our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, but we strengthened it with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We fought segregation, and now it's coming back. Critical race theory is the opposite of Martin Luther King's goal for our country. The goal of CRT is to find racism in every part of American society. It seeks to impose a new segregation on us. We're no longer to be judged as individuals, but instead as members of a group. And those groups are determined by the color of our skin. And we are given the titles of oppressor and oppressed, perpetrator and victim. It just is so anti-American value that it alarms me and it frightens me for our children. One of the things that I think is most insidious about it is it looks at unequal outcomes. You know, I was a special education teacher, and you can't give people the same outcomes. There's so much in the course of our lives that make the outcomes of our lives come out differently. The proponents of CRT look at unequal outcomes and say that they happen because of racism. And it's insidious because it negates meritocracy. The idea that if you work hard and you put effort in and that you persevere, if you make good decisions, that you will succeed, that you'll get your little piece of the American dream. I think the fact that it negates meritocracy is depressing, because what it says is the only thing that matters is the color of your skin, that your character doesn't matter, that your effort doesn't matter, and that the only way for one person to rise is for them to tear down another. I have been challenged by, a member of the news media who said, look at Providence schools. What a mess they are. You can't say that racism doesn't exist in Providence schools. Compare them to Barrington. You can't say that Providence doesn't have racism. What Providence has is mismanagement, and a lot of it. What Providence has is a lot of bad educational leaders who have allowed the schools to not meet the challenges and not deliver good educations to their students. I actually looked up, and Providence spends $1,000 more than the average for the state on education. We give Providence all the resources that they need. Their per pupil costs are higher than the average. It is mismanagement there and not racism. But CRT would have you believe that everything is racism. It's just not true. I've also been asked, does this mean we can't teach history? Of course not. I was taught history. I know about the Civil War. I know about all of the bad things that America has done as it's been growing. America, more than any other country, we're hard on ourselves for the failings of our past, but we learn from them. One of the wonderful things about America is it always strives to do better. So yes, we can teach history, we can teach all of the facts. What we can't do is treat racism in our present-day society as a fact. We can't teach CRT as a fact. We can teach it as opinion. We can ask students to challenge themselves on an opinion, just like we teach children about communism or socialism or any other kind of ism out there. But it's not a fact. It's an opinion. When children are exposed to neo-racism and race shaming, it is a step backwards for our country. It brings new segregation. A school child in Warwick doesn't have any control over what happens nationally or even in Providence. Their skin color has even less to do with what's happening in Providence. Leave those children alone. Stop subjecting them to neo-racism and race shaming. It's destructive, and it makes other problems worse. It threatens the cohesiveness of our American culture. We would never accept race shaming if it was directed towards black school children. We should not accept it when it's directed at white school children. And that is what is happening in our schools. I have the emails. The answer to racism is not more racism. The answer is not a new kind of racism, a new kind of segregation. Race shaming is not the answer. The answer is the goal that was set down by Martin Luther King 70 years ago. And that is that we don't never judge people by the color of their skin, but instead know them as individuals and accept them by the content of their character. That's it, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Morgan. And if you could just stay with us so we can hear everything, and we're going to hold our questions till we hear from the witnesses. We have 120 opposed and 3 in support. So, and Adriana Flores-Pagan? And then Allison Greco after that? Next, we have Dr. Kaylin Brasienko. And then after that, Amanda Iacampo. Welcome, Doctor. You have 1 minute. Please proceed.
Thank you. I am speaking today in strong support of this bill, and you're going to hear a lot of testimony calling it a racist and sexist bill. Those people are lying. They're either lying through malicious intent, or they're lying because they do not fully understand this ideology. So let me be brief and give you a few examples of how this ideology manifests in the real world. The Coca-Cola Company recently...
Could you please refrain from derogatory statements about
Yes,
other
yes, yes,
witnesses.
yes, 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 yes. I only have 1 minute, sir, and I would really like to give some examples. That
Proceed.
the Coca-Cola company recently mandated that their employees do an online training that told them to try to be less white. This training said that to be less white is to be less oppressive, less arrogant, less certain, less defensive, less ignorant, more humble, etc. 8th grade students at a school in Fairfax County, Virginia, were taught that if they believed in the Pledge of Allegiance, then they should become social justice activists to dismantle white privilege. They also played a game of oppression bingo, where they were mandated to identify their own privilege to their classmates. These students are 14 years old. In New York City, parents of white students were told that their goal should be to become white traitors, and anything less than being a white traitor is a white supremacist. At the University of New Hampshire, white staff members were told that their role was to shut up and to educate themselves if they wanted to keep their job. This is a fundamentally racist ideology, and you cannot fight racism by introducing
Your time is up,
more
Doctor,
racism.
and we do accept any written testimony you have, and it will be distributed to the
I am
committee
sure
members.
it will not be read at all, but thank you.
Thank you. And next, we have James Lindsay of New Discourse. Welcome. Mr. Lindsay, please proceed. You have 1 minute. Oh. Welcome, Mr. Lindsay. You have 1 minute. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm hoping to persuade some of you to support this bill. Since I only have 1 minute, I'll be very brief. The ideology from which this bill tries to prohibit, in addition to outright white supremacy and patriarchy, begins from, this is a quote from one of their books on page 3, unlike traditional approaches to civil rights, which favor step-by-step progress and incremental progress, critical race theory calls into question the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, enlightenment rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law. And then on page 23 later, it says that critical race theorists are skeptical of another, highly suspicious actually, of another liberal mainstay, namely rights. So you are trying to prohibit with this bill a ideology being taught by mandatory statute in various places in your by taxpayer money, something that is skeptical of rights, something that questions the constitutional order, something that's un-American, and something divisive.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Chairman, while we're waiting, I'd just like to address the idea that this is political. This has nothing to do with
okay, that's all right, yeah.
It just has nothing to do with Republican or Democrat.
I understand, but we're going, we have someone on right now, Representative. Good. Thank you. Wenyi-Han Wu, welcome. Please proceed. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak in firm support of HB 6070. My name is Dr. Wenyi-Han Wu, Executive Director of California's for Equal Rights Foundation. I'm here to testify in strong support of 6070 because divisive critical race training that impose controversial political views should have no place in K-12 education at the expense of our children's educational and emotional development and your taxpayers' money. Programs, cultural awareness, etc. But the ideological underpinnings of all such programs are neatly in line with critical race theory. I urge all the members of the Education Committee to vote yes on 6070 and consider my much more comprehensive written testimony. Thank you for considering my testimony.
Thank you, Wenyi-Han Wu. Thank you.